Okay, in this tutorial, we'll talk about rendering. So this is just a dummy project to give us an idea of what the project might look like. I also can see here that I have a little bit of extra time. So this is one thing that we might want to consider for our rendering. We can trim the work area and render off the work area. However, I am going to do this with the composition. So in this situation, I would like my composition to end at this moment in time, which for me is 1:21. So I will select my composition, right click and choose composition settings, or hit Control K on my keyboard. And then my composition settings will be here, and I'll just match the duration to what we see here. So for me, 1:21. And we can see here that the background, actually let me just very quickly grab that and change it to a very different color so we can see this. So we do have a shape that is handling our background color, and that's really important for this type of rendering because the background color that's set in the composition will not render as that color. So do make sure that you have a background shape. We've done this previously, and I'll just hit hide here by creating a shape, making sure that nothing was selected. So I'll just click in the empty space down here, and then clicking and dragging to cover the entire space here. I can control the colors up here, so clicking once here, and then choosing the color that I want with the color picker. I'm going to delete that by selecting it and tapping delete. If I wanted to keep it, I would want to drag it all the way to the bottom to make sure that it was the bottommost layer, but in this case I don't want it, so I will delete it. Okay, so it is important prior to render that you watch it with a RAM preview and make sure that it is what you want it to be. And if you're ready to go, everything looks good, the colors look good, there's no little trip ups or anything like that, you are ready to render and make it a final video for your production. So in this case, rendering is what happens to a composition. So I want to select the composition to render. And since it is something I want to happen to a composition, I will use composition. There we go. And then I'm going to come down here to add to Media Encoder Q. My hotkey here is Control Alt and M. This command used to be called Make Movie, so you can think of the M as Make Movie. The render queue is something that will happen inside of After Effects, and it won't give us the same compression or file extension. So we do want to add to Media Encoder Q. Now this is Media Encoder. Have it open already, is another program that's handling all sorts of stuff inside and all sorts of rendering, whether it be audio. Something's happening here. It doesn't quite like that. Let me try again. So I'll select it. Oh, nope, there it goes. Okay. So you should see it, first of all, launch. Sometimes when I do come down to render, I'll launch Adobe Media Encoder by itself. That command here will launch Media Encoder if it's not already opened, but it does take a while for Media Encoder to kind of boot up. So if you know you're going to be sitting down in the lab to render, I would launch Media Encoder and After Effects at the same time. So the same place, right, Start menu, and then Adobe, you'll see them all stacked up there. Just scroll down and you'll see this little purple icon that has, looks like little 8-bit little granules there. This is the one that you'll want to use. So if you are going to be using this at home, make sure you have Adobe Media Encoder installed. Okay, so great. So here is my project one. It's coming from After Effects, and I can see some of the project settings here, which should work for me. But first I'm going to change the output file. I do have a dummy folder currently on my desktop, so I'll navigate to that, and so here it is. So this would be my project folder inside of here. I would add the correct naming conventions for this. I do not need to type in MP4 because that will be handled here. So you can simply edit the first part or just rename it here. So I'll just call this naming conventions. And you should see all of your other projects in here, all of your other files. Currently I won't see anything because nothing else is an MP4. And I'll tell it to save right there. I'm going to jump into the preset simply by clicking once on one of these two blue words. If yours doesn't say H.264 or match source high bitrate, that's fine. It's just we want to affect the preset and the format. Both of those, but clicking on either one of those will take you to this location. So the format required for this class and for all of our renders in this course will be H.264. So that should be the default here. And we do want to match the source and choose a high bitrate. So what this is saying is I want it to be the same size. I want to match what it's coming from, which is 1920 by 1080, 24 frames per second, and all this stuff down here. Okay, and I also want to compress that at a high bit rate so that it doesn't get too crunchy. This will be relatively larger than some other compressions, but we can see the estimated file size right here of 2 megabytes. That's really good, so we're not too concerned about that. I could also change the output name here. So if I wanted to save it to a different location rather than clicking there, I could do so here. I don't have any audio in this project, so I could hypothetically uncheck that export audio. It's just sort of an empty space, but it's really not doing anything for me, right? So it's not shaving off any significant amount of file size, so it's not really important for me to do that. If this was a longer piece that I knew didn't need audio, then I would likely uncheck that to see if I could free up some space. The only other thing I have to do here is come down to the basic video settings. So you'll notice that there are certain tabs here that we can come in and change and whatnot. One thing I would like to point out is the publish. So if you are using this type of pipeline to go to YouTube or Vimeo or something, you can automatically publish from here, or your FTP website. Right. So down here is Twitter, Vimeo. There's YouTube. Right. So through Adobe Media Encoder, you can log into your credentials and it will publish directly to some of your the top known places, destinations. So that can be really helpful, so you don't have to spend your time doing that. So here we go. So the last thing I want to do here is change the width and the height. So I'm just going to uncheck this so that I can change it, and we're simply going to do half resolution. So this is 540 in the height, and I'll hit tab to accept those changes, and we'll see that the top automatically changes to 960. So we'll see 960 by 540, which is half resolution, right? Half of the 1920 by 1080. We still want the same frame rate, right? And all the other aspects down here are great for what we need under the default settings. Yeah, so we're good. So great. So it should be all set. We just need to change that width and height and click OK. And the last thing that I want to do is hit play here to start that. And it should go pretty fast because this file is relatively small. And then I always want to check it. So I'm going to open up my, my file. So this is the file that I will be, if it wants to open, that would be great. Oh, there it goes. Here we go. So this is the file that I would hypothetically share with my client or send off to, publish wherever. So I definitely want to watch it and make sure it is what I want it to be prior to actually letting that happen. I'm going to hit Control L here to loop and just let that loop through. So as I'm watching this over and over again, I can see if there's any blatant mistakes, such as the background color not rendering, right? I didn't have maybe I had a layer turned off or something like that. So if that were the case, no problem. That took, a couple seconds to render. So I can delete this MP4 and go back through the same, processes, right? I'll just grab this one and hit delete on my keyboard. And it says, are you sure you want to delete it? It's not deleting anything it's not deleting a file. It's just deleting it from the queue. Right, and I could come back in here if I made a mistake, and then very quickly, maybe I wanted this to start a little bit later, right? So if that's the case, then I can fix that right out of the gate and then send it to the render queue and make sure I save this for the final output. Okay, so the last thing then, once I have my whole folder ready to go, is that I would then zip this whole folder up, which would contain all of the needed components on the project outline, and zip it up and submit it online. That's it.